Just going to see how we can work out this. I'm glad that we're not having a technological meltdown or anything, but the night's still young, right? So hopefully that's not the case. So, but yeah, thanks so much for being on tonight. I was just going to talk, open up and just talk a little bit about things that are going on, and uh, just what's happening with our at our base. And there is a lot going on. I'm just trying to work some of that stuff out. Um, so yeah, so the office. I think I mentioned to you before. Well, we were away from the office for a while. We were doing some work down south, and the office the office itself has been under construction for more than probably a year. The building that we have and the property they have as residential. Um, what's nice about that is that my son um, has moved to the same property that's attached to this mill building in Franklin, New Hampshire, and so it's good to have my son working with me, and I'm grateful for that. And he's close by, so he could really come down from his apartment into the office in his jammies and and stay in the building. It's all kind of cool. That's a cool thing. But unfortunately, the office being under construction is that's one bad thing. So I haven't been able to get into my office for more than a month, and so being away wasn't such a bad thing. But um, the oh, that's interesting. Destination Freedom is in. Wonder who that is. Uh, who's using Destination Freedom as a name? Anyway, it's not me. Who knows? I don't think it's the missus. Could be my son, but I doubt it. Who knows? Anyway, I'm suspect. Anyway, so just so you know what I'm talking about is um, we're live on YouTube, which is cool, and then also we have a go-to meeting um, that we're also where you can interact and you can speak and all that stuff. So it's a little more interactive on the go-to meeting, and you can get into this go-to meeting if you wanted to go to the Destination Freedom website. That's destinationfreedom.org, and if this is a Wednesday night, usually, then you can come into that and be in there instead of being live on YouTube. And then eventually this will be recorded, and if you watch this, that's all good. So anyway, so the office, back to the office. Good, thanks, Jake the Snake. It's cool. Um, the the office, so it's been under construction, and I've been away, and that's been helpful. But what happened was while I was away, they were doing repairs to the roof, had the roof, all the whatever's on the roof, removed, and they had them tarped. And then we had a major high wind issue and like a foot and a half of wet snow and stuff like that. So all that water in the roof came through the roof to the unit above me, which had nobody in it. It was empty. They're doing construction up there, and that ran into my office and really damaged a lot in my office. Lost um, most, I think all my electronics are okay, but I lost a lot of paperwork, client files and stuff like that got wet, and so I'm trying to save that stuff, and it takes a lot of time, and they're going to help me some of that, but that's what I've been working on the last week or so, and so that's been very distracting, and then being back here and dealing with the property and taking care of the little missus and all those things. Those are all on my plate. In addition to all your work, we've had a good response, and so we're working on a number of clients in their passport process. We have a number of clients that are doing the workshop and other classes and things like that, and so that's been very exciting, and I'm thankful for that. Um, so that's on our plate, and we've got great things happening with that. We have some debt discharge clients as well, and they'll be on the website doing the debt discharge workshop. So that's there. And so anyway, so today is I'm glad it's Wednesday and that I'm able to get into some Q&A. one of the things before we get into that question and answer stuff was I was just usually each morning when I get up, I have coffee or tea, and well, I have coffee, but my wife many times has tea in the morning, and we get to talk about our vision, our goals, our plans, how we're relating to it, what's going on. And for me, that is a huge part of the joy of my life, is just being with my wife, and we get to work out all that stuff. And it's not always easy, and sometimes it's edgy, and then sometimes we're afforded some time to play some cards in the morning. That to me is a joy with when we start our day that way, and I'm thankful that I can do that. One of the things that I want to say about the state citizenship things and such as that is many times when I talk on our classes and in our talks, when I say that no one is going to take a tax stand while being employed by a corporation, whether it's large or small, and I stand by that. And so and the reason that's so important is because it's one thing for you to take a tax stand, but when you are engaging with an entity, a corporation or whatever, who is determined that it's in the federal zone and that it withholds and does things with respect to IRS, it's not going to risk an audit with the IRS by handling you outside of the federal zone or whatever that may be. It's not fair that they're not on board and you want to unplug and all that, and for you to think that you're going to withhold. Now, one of the ways that I can tell that someone doesn't understand these processes is the fact that they think this is about taxes. Okay, when we talk about state citizenship, taxes or not having an income tax liability is a byproduct of not being in that jurisdiction. And so many times I say to clients and what have you, it's more important that for you to understand who has an income tax liability than that you don't. Because a lot of people will be wrong and think that they don't have an income tax liability, all the while writing and figuring out and having bad paperwork and think that it's unjust. Or even, this is another thing, one of the ways that I ask people to find out if they understand the concepts. And I say, do you believe or think that the federal income tax is unconstitutional? And those that say, oh, I think it's unconstitutional, again, they don't understand federal jurisdiction. They don't understand how the Constitution gives the federal government the authority to have exclusive legislative authority in all cases whatsoever in the District of Columbia or the federal zone, Guam, Puerto Rico, Virgin Islands, America, Samoa, all those federal territories, if you will, they're all in federal jurisdiction. And they have the power delegated to them by the Constitution to have unlimited, let me see, the way the phrasing works in the clause 17 is they have exclusive legislative authority in all cases whatsoever in that jurisdiction. And of course, federal gun laws, drug laws, all kinds of regulation and control is in that jurisdiction, either geographically or subject matter, which federal citizens, based on the 14th Amendment, being a citizen subject to the jurisdiction thereof, are subject matter jurisdiction. And therefore, they have an income tax liability worldwide. So when I think about that, and getting back to that morning talk with my wife and all, the joy of trying to draft up and do certain things business-wise or whatever, not only just outside federal jurisdiction, but to leave the grind, okay? Leave the grind and actually create things that make money. And so that's one of the things that I was just going to mention. I'll answer that question now. There's a question that came in on the GoToMeeting. It says here, this person writes, curious how your program deals with capital gains taxes on real estate or stocks. I understand how the passport process addresses income tax. Please advise. Well, first of all, the passport process doesn't deal with income tax. they are asking for social security numbers in the passport process, but the passport process has nothing to do with the income tax. Now, if someone has an income tax liability, the IRS can write to send us transmit a certification to the State Department blocking or preventing them from getting passport. That is true. So federal citizens and resident aliens have an income capital gains tax. State citizens have no such liability because they're not federal citizens or resident aliens. So it isn't our program. It's the tax code that would address that. So there are no capital gains for state citizens because their income is not taxed. So that's the short, quick, true answer. Um, and hello, Wendy. Wendy's on YouTube. Was glad to have you on here. Um, yes. Okay. Well, actually, this is my wife and I. So obviously, that's Lawrence instead of Wendy. But she's the social media gal. That's why you're in there, Lawrence. That's good. I did get the passport and working good. Good. Yeah, we're going to be moving your stuff ahead. Uh, before Friday. So we're in the process of emailing that out to you. That'll be good. Here's a question: does the Bill of Rights protect citizens from exclusive jurisdiction within the? Okay. Well, first of all, the Bill of Rights does secures no rights. Okay. There's no such thing as that. Bill of Rights is a document, the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. The Constitution doesn't protect you either. There's no such thing as that. That's pure fantasy. And there's no such thing as constitutional rights. If there was any, it's just a misnomer, okay? Rights, all rights are natural. They're given to us by our Creator. They're in our DNA. Rights, when you recognize the difference between a right and a privilege, rights don't require anybody else to do anything, okay? No one is violated when you're demonstrating what you have right to, okay? So the Bill of Rights is a bill, the first 10 amendments of restrictions on the federal government of what they can and cannot do, and that's all it is. And so it declares the limitations of the federal government. So calling it the Bill of Rights is just terrible. And one of the reasons we know it's terrible is because the Ninth Amendment of the Constitution says, and I paraphrase, it says, the numeration of rights in the Constitution shall not be construed or understood, that's my words, understood as being the only rights that you have. Okay, so just because the Constitution discloses or references certain rights doesn't mean that that's the only rights you have. If you want to find out what more rights you have, you might want to look into the scriptures to understand what your rights may be. And really, one of the most important things that you can understand is your relationship with the divine and how that looks, and your pursuit of happiness and the joy and what the purpose of your life is. If your life doesn't have purpose, then you should immediately set out on determining what that purpose is so that you can have joy in the things that you do. And your work, this work, anything, any kind of work is not your purpose. Your work should support your purpose, okay? Because work in and of its own self is really it's just really activity, and it's not doesn't really describe or disclose your purpose in that regard. But anyway, getting back to the where we're talking about work and such as that, is that this stuff that we do is about pulling out of federal jurisdiction, and certainly we're talking administratively. So the idea of that is to be able to have proof or documents disclosing your state citizenship, what that is, and again, that's based on habitation and domicile. Um, let's see, and so the idea is that we deal with citizenship and making sure that you're disclosing or claiming your state citizenship. Again, that's based on habitation and domicile, and not agreeing or desiring to have that 14th Amendment federal citizenship. And we know on paper that the federal government defines U.S. citizenship by the 14th Amendment. We have it in writing from them. Also, IRS also references U.S. citizenship is the 14th Amendment. Now, just so you know, Article 4, Section 2 of the Constitution makes reference to the citizens of the states are entitled to all privileges and immunities of citizens in the several states. The Constitution was written in the late 1700s. The 14th Amendment was 1868. So the reference in the Constitution of state citizens predates the 14th Amendment. There were state citizens, and there was no such thing as a United States citizen before the 14th Amendment. Now, Americans were called United States citizens if they were citizens of one of the states of the Union. And so that's loosely what a United States citizen is in that category. This is why many times I say to people, I am a United States citizen and I'm not a United States citizen. Both those are true. Okay. And so how can that be true? Well, because it depends upon the definition of the term United States. In the tax code and in the Code of Federal Regulations, many times, if not all the time, the definition of the term United States is going to be the federal government. Okay. In the Hooven case from 1945, the Supreme Court defined the United States as having three separate and distinct meanings. At least in that case, it did. Okay. And the second definition is the federal government. And the third definition in the Hooven case that it lists are the states united under and by the Constitution. So be careful when you say, I am a United States citizen, and be careful when you say you're not a United States citizen, because it depends upon the definition of that term, United States. Someone asked a question, says, after been recorded and published, can one apply for a passport? I'm not understanding what you're meaning by been recorded and published. I'm making up that what you mean is that you've submitted some documents to the county in some capacity, and you've made some declaration with respect to that, and now you're asking if you can do the passport. Certainly, if I were helping you with that, I would be very interested in reading what you recorded and or published with respect to yourself, so that I can look at it and see if there are inconsistencies, and to see also whether that supports or inhibits this work in determining that you have that you're not a federal 14th Amendment citizen and you're a citizen of your state. Let's see. Someone asks online, I'm the younger Christopher on your wall. Still look at, I don't know who that is. Anyway, just making a comment about the background. This picture back here, one of my favorite pictures of my wife and I. It's a full-size black and white on the wall of my sweetie here, and we had a photographer take that picture, so it's part of my joy. Thanks for that. Someone says, what's the difference between citizen and citizen of the several states in Article 4, Section 2? Well, that's a good question. One is a federal citizen, has an income tax liability, and is subject to the jurisdiction thereof, that jurisdiction being the District of Columbia and federal regulation and control. That's a federal citizen. That's a U.S. citizen, of course. And then Article 4, Section 2 makes reference to the state citizens, and they are citizens in the states who the federal government has to abide by the Constitution and its limitations when dealing with them. One is within the District of Columbia, one is without the District of Columbia. Also eliminates that income tax liability. That's the difference between those two citizens. This person in the chat says that they're a state national. Now, I don't tend to use the term national. Many times people don't really get that. But it is true that the states are nations, okay? And we deal with that in the passport process. When you're dealing with your birth state, you're dealing with your nativity. And so the federal government also makes reference to the natives of the states when dealing with the concept of nationality. And so, yes, it is true that states are nations. So, it is accurate with respect, but I don't tend to use the word national, because many people will make reference to himself as an American national. All that is federal, and we steer away from it. Someone asks on our go-to meeting, says, "What are your thoughts on the whole uh, repudiation thing that some people do?" I'm not sure what you're referring to. Are you referring to um, what do they call that? They call that I'll think of it in a second here. Um, Revocation of election. Is that what you're talking about? The whole repudiation thing? Because again, I don't know what you mean by that. Some people do. And then you mentioned, so would I consider myself a non-resident alien? Well, I would consider myself non-resident alien with respect to the District of Columbia, or the United States government in that capacity. I don't reside in the District of Columbia or the United States as those codes define, and I'm alien because I'm not a U.S. citizen, U.S. federal citizen. I'm not an alien in New Hampshire. I'm a citizen of New Hampshire, and although I don't tend to reside, I reside in Florida in the wintertime. Sometimes I can reside in another country, in Mexico, or I can reside in Arizona. You can reside anywhere on the planet you want. Residency is what we call transient, okay? And however long you stay may in different jurisdictions may mean different things. So I'm never referring to where I'm staying temporarily as being anything important. It could be important to someone else, but not to me. I can reside everywhere all over the planet, but you'll only have one habitation domicile, and that's the place you intend to return to. If you have a driver's license in a state, that's typically where you have your habitation domicile. You wouldn't have multiple habitation domicile. So with respect to that, I'm alien with respect to California, and I would be non-resident alien in California. I'm non-resident alien in all 50 states except for New Hampshire. Okay, and I'm non-resident alien with respect to the Washington D.C. or the United States, the District of Columbia. Um, a person says, "I'm new and just getting started and learning about state citizen versus federal U.S. citizen. What do you say? Why do you say you can't work for a company as a state?" I didn't say that you can't work for a company. I said you can't be employed. You want to, if a company is worth you serving, then you can contract with them. And all companies can contract with you. Then they'll ask you for certain tax information, and we have information that will support you. But you have to be responsible for your own taxes. You cannot have a company withholding on your behalf and be out of the federal zone. It's not possible. And sometimes these people who do revocation election or think this is about taxes, they'll still be paying into Social Security thinking they have that obligation. So it's convoluted, so we don't do that. Would I consider myself a transient foreigner? I don't consider myself much. Okay. I consider myself everything that I say I am. But no, I mean it's um yeah, you am I transient foreigner? No. I don't consider myself, am I transient? I don't know. No, I doubt it. In the sense of saying, transient may take on a definition of almost being a vagrant and something like that. No, I always have a purpose and a place to go, and I have a place to stay. So I'm not transient in that capacity. As a foreigner, I'm foreign to whatever's. I'm not. I'm a foreign to everything except for New Hampshire, whatever that means. So that's just a term. I've heard you can fill out a WABEN to solve. No, WABN is not appropriate document. That's a common error out there. Just read it. If you read the instructions of a WABN, if you understand the term United States, you'll understand why you can't use it. It's in the federal zone. Every W-8 the IRS produces is in the federal zone as a resident alien. We have a general W-8, a certificate of foreign status. We have them for our state citizens. It has terms and all that. It's a beautiful document. We have them for clients. But no, a WABN is an improper document to use if you're outside the federal zone. You'll have a tax liability if you do a WABN. People who use it don't understand the subject matter. It's a common error out there. So we handle that in our state citizenship class. And you can understand some of the basics of this from looking at the and being a part of the state citizen class, which is about a 6-hour class online. You can take it anytime you like. You can sign up for it. It's $385 right now. And so you can sign into that. You'll kind of get to know me, how I think about things, and we'll end up in the tax code so you can understand who has the income tax liability. And again, one of the things I think is unique to what we say is the federal income tax is absolutely constitutional. The Constitution empowers them to do exactly what they do. And so, that's the same thing with federal gun laws. People think they're unconstitutional. Nope, they are absolutely constitutional for federal citizens and in the District of Columbia. Makes complete sense. The Second Amendment would be required for the federal government dealing with a state citizen and being in the states. So someone says online, can you speak a bit about foreign irrevocable contractual trust? Sure. When in our class we go into this from section 7701 that deals with trusts, estates, and all that. And if a federal citizen is a trustee of a trust, then that trust is in federal jurisdiction. How do I know that? Because it says it is. So it literally says that. So when we set up a foreign irrevocable trust, we do. We only have those that have done our passport process that we can prove or know that they don't have an income tax liability. So, that's part of what we do with that. And of course, people will do that for keeping your property out of probate, and also not owning property, because some people would have concerns about the IRS when they begin the process. So many times they'll come up with we'll set up a trust for them so they can move property into that, so they don't own anything, and therefore it'd be very difficult for IRS to serve lien or levy on the trust documents because it's outside the federal zone. Is there an IRS publication saying employer must acquire a TIN from their subcontractors if they hold 24% amount? Well, that's a great question, and we answer that in our W8, W9 class, our workshop for that. Also in our 1445, when dealing with real estate transactions, that's a common place where they want to deal with that. And again, we deal with in the class when not an employer, but when a company is asking for a tax ID number or a TIN, social or whatever, we have a W. That's called a W9 in whatever form they're having. They're looking for a tax ID. There's no compelling someone to do that. All information is provided freely. You have a right to remain silent, but it's a request for tax ID number. And so on our forms, we show that you're exempt, and therefore we also include the W8, which is a certificate of foreign status. If they were wanting to hold 24%, then they're trying to explain or understand like you're a resident alien, okay? Because when you provide a certificate of foreign status, they're thinking alien, okay, they get alien, but because they think the United States is here and not in the District of Columbia, they're thinking that you're a resident alien if you're, in the federal zone or whatever it is. So they would be withholding 24% because they're alleging that the transaction is taking place in the United States, District of Columbia. They're not thinking District of Columbia, they're just thinking United States. If you don't get the term United States correct, you're not going to understand the tax code. That's a huge deal with respect to that. So that's pretty powerful. With respect to your question, during this process, this is on YouTube. They're asking this question. It says, during this process, at what point do you recommend I tell the company I work for I can only contract working for them as a contractor? Well, that's a great question. We only handle great questions on this channel. So sorry, I keep saying that. No, it is a great question because it's an important thing to for many of our clients do that. And so what we recommend is to do the passport process, in which you submit documents under penalty of perjury is true and correct. So from that place, you would come into human resources and whatever to say, listen, I did this process with the U.S. State Department, and I eliminated my income tax liability, so I can no longer do withholding. And so therefore I have to contract with the company if you want to work with the company. So I'm going private, and and I can contract, and I have proper tax documents for you, but I can no longer do the employee thing. So here's my notice for that. But I still like to serve the company in my personal capacity, and I'll contract with him. So each week I will invoice you. See, so some people are so that all they've ever known is getting jobs, so they don't even know how to think about being responsible for their own ability to create wealth. And we want to help those people come out of that and begin to feel free in what they do. I'm noticing on the go-to meeting here that someone has their hand raised. Let me see who it is. Oh, did I answer Alexis? Oh, Alexis got questions down below here. Let me just make sure I get her question answered. Let me see if I can. Okay. Let me just see if I got that question answered. Okay, so let's see. It's just me starting and learning about state citizen. What would you? Why do I? Okay, I answered that question. Would you consider yourself? No, I answered that question. Blah blah. Can you talk more about the trust services I offered? Well, I can talk more about the trust. You got my question. Okay, great. Yeah, so the trusts are a useful tool, and it affords you a bit of privacy. And no, we don't have tax ID numbers. And listen, let me just settle this as well on there. Don't think that a good remedy, whoever talks to you or tells you that coming up with an LLC is a good idea. And at no time ever, if you have an entity or something that has a tax ID number, you're saying that you're doing a trade or business in the District of Columbia. And so therefore, you don't want to do that. You want to be outside the federal zone. KO has his mic open. You have a question, KO? Okay, cool. Oh, that's so a good question from Brianna. Why did Irwin Schiff go to jail, Lynn Merritt and Wesley Snipes? Those are, that's just a good question. I don't get that question a lot. There's a couple answers to that. The reason that Irwin Schiff went to jail was because he had an income tax liability and he didn't like paying taxes, and therefore he did whatever he was doing. You can read that in his publications and things like that. But I was looking up what Irwin Schiff was. His argument was he didn't like that the IRS was taking his Social Security. Well, the fact that he was receiving money from the District of Columbia creates his tax liability. And of course, if he never made a distinction between him being a federal citizen or not, then everywhere he voted, every time he got a driver's license, every time he filled out documents as a U.S. citizen, he's declaring that he is, including on his passport, declaring that he's a federal citizen with an income tax liability. So he was in that jurisdiction. That's why he had an income tax liability, no matter what his argument was. Okay. Now, Wesley Snipes went to prison because he was doing the, if I can remember, I want to say that it was the 861 argument, very similar to Larkin Rose and why he went to prison. The 861 argument, what's bad about it is they're not getting the definition of the term United States correct, and therefore they're not interpreting the tax code properly, okay? And so that's part of it. Now, Lynn Meredith understood the state citizenship thing, but here's the thing about Lynn, okay? And let me say this about all the major cases with respect that I've ever read with IRS, okay? And that is this. This is my generalization. No one who wins or loses in an IRS case wins or loses on the merits of their case. Now, I'm not talking about the average, federal citizen that just didn't want to pay and all that. That's one thing. I'm talking about people who were taking a tax stand on some point. Let me give you an example. The guy, the attorney, I'll think of his name in a second. He was, I'll think of his name shortly here, but he was taking a tax stand. Now, he was very good in being persuasive of why he didn't have a tax liability, and he won against it. He won his jury over, and therefore he won that case um, because he won his jury. Because other people have had the same argument and failed to communicate and win their jury, and they lost because they lost their jury. There was Conklin, or whoever, the FedEx pilot. She had an argument that a lot of people used. There was a woman that was on the jury that refused to convict her, and therefore she won her case because of that woman. I talked to them both in Washington, D.C., and so she won her case because she won her jury. Lynn Meredith, although her argument was correct, and they were charging her with setting up trusts with tax ID numbers on them or social security numbers. And there were clients that I understood that were putting their social security number to get bank accounts on their trust document, or they had a tax ID number. I don't know which one it was, but they were putting, they were using the trust, the numbers for the trust as if they were tax numbers. And so they were opening up bank accounts. And so the IRS used her clients against her as if she was scamming them in that capacity. And so Lynn is really ballsy. And so even they showed in her case that her license plate in California, she had a Corvette or whatever it was, and it said in the back, tax rebel. So she was real ballsy, and she, just like Irwin Schiff, who was also really, I'll just use the word obnoxious, failed to win the jury and lost. And so she didn't lose on the merits of her case. She lost her jury because the jury wasn't persuaded, and that's a big deal. So both, you could win your jury or you could lose your jury on your activity alone, and that's a big deal. So anyway, that's part of it. One of the things that now, I learned a lot from Lynn Meredith. She was my mentor, and I was prepared to testify on her tax trial, but she, at the last minute, didn't want me to come because she didn't want me to be bothered by the IRS. But that was some interesting time. But I learned about doing the passport process from her years ago. That was back in the 90s. Okay, but the way, and being a part of Ed and Elaine Brown's trial and seeing the IRS use passport applications against them in court, showing the passport application showing that they swore under penalty of that they are U.S. citizens, or as the federal government says, a 14th Amendment citizen, the IRS convicted them by their own testimony. And it was at that time in the break that I was talking to the other people there saying, I did my passport as a state citizen. And that was when people there were saying, well, we want to do our passport as a state citizen as well. And it was at that time we began to get certified copies of the passport file, certified by the Secretary of the United States so that you can use in court. So all that came out of all that. I tried to reach out to Wesley Snipe, who was a friend of mine. We did theater work together in Orlando. We did some theater work at Rollins College in Orlando. We did some plays together. Anyway, so Wesley was an excellent actor back then, still is. So I've been trying to reach him, with unsuccessfully, because I want to just hook up with him. But anyway, I tried to help him stay out of jail, and his attorney didn't want to give me access to him so I could assist. The attorney said he was all set and he had to serve time. I said. Someone says when GoTo opened it, would not connect with my audio. States that it said I would. I can't hear a word. Yeah, I can't help you with that because that's an internal thing. I would recommend in that situation, if you reach the GoTo meeting for some help, they have a 24-hour access to have them help you with the audio on that. You're obviously in, but your audio is, listen, I can't say I haven't had trouble with GoTo meeting. I'm just glad my audio works. So sorry. You could go to YouTube and hear me live that way. That might be helpful. Then let's see. Someone says had the same problem. Okay. That's a good word. That's a good remedy. We're selling that. Advice to use default settings. Okay. We're getting technical support on the call. Yeah, it's distracting to do that. I think you can private message each other. I would appreciate it if you do that way. We can, that it's not. I say, what's thoughts on Mitch Modelsky? Paul Mitchell, which is Mitch, or Paul Mitchell, in my opinion, is probably one of the finest writers for these legal things, and I've paid him to do work for me and stuff, especially when I was dealing with my bank. One of the best writings on state citizenship is probably the Federal Zone, which he wrote, and his work is impeccable. Because of his genius in the subject matter, he's not very sociable, uh, and so sometimes he can be a little rough in the edges. And I don't, that not like a bad thing, because anything that you give yourself to, sometimes he's helped a lot of people, and a lot of people expect him just to help, and that's how he makes his living is in the work that he's doing. So I have nothing but accolades for Paul Mitchell. I'm thankful for his life and for the work that he's done. He had been incarcerated by the federal government for over a year, and they ended up having no charges against him, and he never went to court with respect to it. But he was incarcerated for over a year. I imagine that generated a lawsuit from him. I don't know how successful he's been in his lawsuits, but because of his talent, he litigates a lot. You don't recommend doing revocation election. Is that correct? That is correct. Because first of all, there was never an election. Okay, I get it that election's a choice, but I'm asserting that you never have made choices to be in the federal zone or to do these things. I think you've been doing things in error and by tradition and all this other stuff. So I don't look at it as a good sign. Plus, people will be in all sorts of different places, and they'll do that revocation election. And we have seen, I probably have a half a dozen clients that were fined $5,000 for a frivolous return or an informational return. And so I wouldn't risk it. It'll produce nothing. And many times people do the revocation election while being employed. They're still paying in Social Security. They still are federal citizens. And so it's problematic with respect to that. So it's not something I recommend. Yeah, he did not. He did go to jail in the sense that he was incarcerated, but he was never charged, and it was never ultimately convicted of anything. So no, he didn't go to jail for anything like that. He was held and was being processed all that time. In some Lynn Meredith's case, yes, Paul Mitchell worked for Lynn Meredith. They did have a falling out. I don't know how much Paul was involved with their case on her benefit, for her benefit or not, or whatever their falling out was. I do know that they did have a difference of opinion. So that came out that way. I'm thankful that I know these people. They did change my life. That book, Vultures and Eagles Clothing, was a book that moved me from where I was in my life to coming out of the federal zone. And again, that was back in the 90s. Those books were not damaged in the flooding in my office. I'm thankful for that. So I'm grateful. So that was Lynn Meredith. I like Lynn. I think she's a fireball, and I remember her. I was asking her to understand some of the paperwork she was doing for me, and Maya Trust I originally set up was through Lynn Meredith's organization. And I remember calling up saying, like, listen, I don't understand what I'm reading here and all. She said, like, I asked her to help me. She would not help me. She said, you have to read the citations. You have to drive yourself to understand. Listen, all of my Bible teachers said the same thing. Any of the teachers that I have usually will tell me I have to look up the Bible verses, look up the cases, read them, understand, and push yourself. And listen, I was educated by my government, back in the late 70s. I graduated in 1980. And look, I lack comprehension. I know that. So when I'm reading stuff, I sometimes have to read it slow, read it out loud, read it again, so that I can get comprehension. Now, once I get something, man, I can hold on to it tight, and I pray for comprehension, but it's challenging. So other than not winning over the jury, is it clear why others went to jail and none of us suffer that same fate? Well, you're going to have to understand what it is you're doing and why. Okay? I mean, there's plenty of IRS people go to jail all the time. And so, people have income tax liability. So like I said, it's more important for you to understand who has the income tax liability, so you can be clear to understand whether you do or don't. Okay, that's an important principle, because a lot of people just figure that they don't owe it because the government shouldn't be able to tax my income and all that conversation. But that's not about that jurisdiction. This is about jurisdiction, and you should endeavor to try to understand that. Yeah, there's if I read even this, let me just say this about the IRS and the about the IRS that talks about state citizen. If you read and when I did that video with Jeff Berwick, their editors sent Jeff information saying the IRS says this state citizenship is frivolous, right? And that is true. The IRS absolutely says that the reason federal citizenship is frivolous for anybody's particular case is, it says, and I've read this, is that the one claiming that they're a state citizen fails to produce evidence to support their claim. Now, the Browns were saying that they were not U.S. citizens in that capacity, but they didn't produce evidence to support their claim. Matter of fact, they used the 861 argument that Larkin Rose promoted. And matter of fact, Larkin Rose had already gone to jail using the 861 argument, and shortly thereafter, they were using the same argument. Matter of fact, before the jury, they played a video an hour before lunch, an hour after, whatever, and the first words out of Elaine's mouth after that was, well, that was about as clear as mud. This is her own testimony. And I'm listening to this, and I'm listening to how convoluted it is. And do you think the jury was going to go, oh yeah, that makes complete sense? And the IRS prosecutor was saying, by the way, the person that promoted this video, he went to prison, last week or the week before. That's how bad their testimony was. So again, you have to understand this is a jurisdictional thing. It's not about definition of income or all those other convoluted things that a lot of people in the tax honesty movement have used. Even like when the former IRS agents like Joe Bannister, Sherry Jackson, John Turner, Clifton Beale, all these different IRS agents were in different places when they were dealing with IRS, and certainly not in their own individual capacity. But Sherry Jackson went to prison because she wasn't challenging jurisdiction. She was just feeling it was unjust. It's a real simple thing to understand or to find out if someone understands federal jurisdiction is if you ask them, do you think the income tax is unconstitutional? If they say they believe it is, they do not understand the federal government's authority. So that's an amazing thing. Let's see, there's a question on here. It says, I received a pension from Tennessee Valley Authority. Does that disqualify me on your whole harmless question is receiving benefits? Well, I mean, again, you would have to disclose it. But again, so and it could be a tax liability. I believe that you would have your paperwork may be incorrect that you did with them and for them, because they may be submitting documents and things on your behalf as if you are a federal citizen. So you'd have to clean up that paperwork. So in that section about receiving benefits, and of course, if you're receiving money from taxpayers, I'm actually referring to the federal government. The state government would be another matter. And of course, if they're withholding for, like as if you're a federal citizen, all that has to be cleaned up. So it could create a tax liability, but it doesn't. You can answer that question in the affirmative, or at least initial that you understand it, or agree that you're not a federal citizen. Oh, isn't Martha lovely being here? Hi, Martha. We should get together and have some dinner with our dinner group. Won't that be fun? Yeah, so yeah, we definitely have to do that. So I was talking to the missus about that. TVA was once a government agency. TVA? I'm not sure what that is. Let me see, back over here to the go-to meeting. It says, does being employed put you in the federal zone? Well, simply because they ask you to fill out tax forms. Yeah. I mean, if you're filling out a tax form as if you have a tax liability and you're signing within the United States and and you're doing the withhold. You're not denying that you have a tax liability if you're filling out a W-4 form. So yeah, that's a huge breakdown. Like you have a tax liability, of course. Or is it because the corporation is in the federal zone? A little of both, but mostly because of your own testimony. They're not using the government's, or I'm sorry, they're not using the corporation as testimony for you. If you notice, 1099s are filled out by the corporation. That's not your testimony. What they do is their own. They're doing that as an information return. Everyone who fills out these forms, they fill them out under penalty of perjury as true, correct, and complete. So be careful of what you're saying is true, correct, and complete. Why did Joe Bannister never go to prison? Joe Bannister never went to prison because he's a sweetheart. That guy's a good speaker. He is wonderful. He has an excellent story. And so when he was dealing with the IRS at that time, I don't know what they were. I don't know that they were charging him with willful failure to file or anything like that. I don't know, but I do know that he was in court and he won his jury. That's why I believe he didn't go to prison. So can you say that you don't fill out those forms? I'm not employed. I don't fill out those forms. I have forms. The only IRS forms we use are our W-8 and W-9, and that's the only ones. That's when someone else is asking for a tax ID number, we have our W-9. That's what that is. And we always require our clients to read the instructions of the W-9, understand who has these obligations and what they are. That's why on our form we're exempt, and then we have a certificate of foreign status as that's the reason for the exemption. Let's see. They said TVA was once a. I don't know what that is. I see what you're saying. Tennessee Valley Authority, TVA. Yeah, I don't know how to answer that question, nor is it really relevant with respect to that. So it may be if you're receiving money from the taxpayers, then of course it's immoral. Okay. So, and even if you have military benefits or anything, anytime you've worked for the government and you're receiving benefits after you worked with them, in my opinion, it's stealing from people. Listen, all taxes are collected under pain of death. By morality, if you stop serving people, then you should, other than in a private arrangement. But if you're receiving money that people go to prison for not paying, then you're receiving stolen goods, And so I feel strongly about that. And again, if you're in that jurisdiction, then yeah, it's part of welfare and all that crap. You can be a part of that. But from a moral standpoint, if you're receiving tax dollars as if you deserve them in some capacity, then it's theft. And just because it's legal means nothing. So that's the bottom line. Now listen, if I was paying military, they need the money now. They're risking their life now. I would pay them top dollar, more than it's obscene what the low-ranking military get for risking their life. Okay, pay them like CEOs or like football players. Pay military people like football players. While they're in, they'll stay in, they'll serve. That'll be a financial benefit. When they're done, you're done. You're out. No more money. Invest what you got. Nobody, including politicians, nobody in government should receive retirement. It's taxing the kids of the future, and that's taxation without representation. So they didn't vote on that. So no governmental retirement at all. What killed GM? The unions, people that ever worked for GM, getting paid, and so the cost of doing business in that one stupid car has to pay everybody who ever worked for GM. It's bad business. It's stupid. You can in the private sector you can do that, and then GM gets bailed out. What a crock of shit. Now the taxpayers have to pay that. Bad business. Should fail. Bankrupt. Bye-bye. Don't trust corporations. Would you would never be convicted because you're oh, you're too kind. You're so kind. No, I have those thoughts in my head. I would rather deal with a court than having a client, because I know myself, and look, you cross over. I determined years ago that it was the hill I was prepared to die on, and I don't want to die. So I'm not trying to square off with them. I'm not bothered by IRS. They're doing what people want them to do, and they fill out paperwork. Every American that signs a document as true, correct, and complete under penalty of perjury is a liar. Everyone without exception is a liar. They deserve the consequence of their lies. The Almighty would hold them to that. Because what the hell do they know about the tax code? Nothing. And yet they fill it out because I'm afraid. That's the reality of our lives as Americans. We just do what we're told to do. Never going to square off with the government because you're too afraid. If you're afraid to administratively say no to the feds, do you really think you're going to stand up and resist them with your arms? It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen, folks. And if you wore a mask, you will never defend America because you don't know how to say no yet. You have to grow up, be responsible, and say no on some level. And listen, on Jeff's video, he had me tagged as tax rebellion or whatever. This isn't tax rebellion. This is the tax code, my friends, okay? This isn't, we don't do things under the table or behind all that crap. This is in the light and out in the open. The federal government's doing what it's done. I assert this. This is astonishing. I assert that generally speaking, the federal government is always upholding the Constitution. How's that for a freaking statement? When you understand how the federal government, how the Constitution has given them this authority in their jurisdiction, and that every time they hand out money or that they move into an area legally, or then they have this authority, and they have this authority not only in D.C. but with their federal citizens. So. Am I familiar with Dave Champion? Yes. There are things that he says and that I agree with and all that. Except for, he's not making this case of federal citizenship. If he's traveled, has a passport, he's declaring that he is a federal citizen and he has a tax liability. But it's very easy for people to just not file and pay. And if how he gets paid and how he discloses and stuff, it's very easy to stay out of that jurisdiction by not participating in that paperwork that would bring him in. I'm sure Dave Champion wouldn't fill out bad paperwork for that. And yet, if I examine it, I would imagine that, especially if he's done a passport, that the IRS certainly could prosecute him as being a federal citizen. So, but again, I like Dave Champion. I like his attitude. I like his ballsiness and all that stuff. I followed him and I'm subscribed to him on YouTube and all that. So I like him. And same thing with Paymont in Freedom Law School. I like these people. I like all of them. And I may not agree with them. And I've evolved over the years into my own field. But I didn't make up any of this stuff. This is all well known. And I'm just, honed my craft and learned the unique thing for me is really the work we've done with the State Department and the passport process. But again, it's a known thing and it's out there. And so, but you have to learn what it is to you and what it means for you. You will have your own path. Do not rely upon someone else's faith or belief for yourself. You have to make this stuff your own. Cannot get audio to work. Sorry. It's a very common thing. You can't hear me, so you'll have to read my lips. No. Go to the YouTube channel, and you have to change the program that you downloaded or whatever it is. So I hope that works for you. All that stuff is it's got to do with the file that you download. And again, we have that information on. You have to get help from GoToMeeting. These programs are trouble enough as it is. So, wow, we blew through an hour on that. We may have an early night tonight unless you have more questions. But I am thankful for you. And these were some great questions. You guys did really well. And I wanted to say for Rafael, I wanted to let you know how much we appreciate your gift. It is a treasure that I will keep forever. And my wife also loves your excellent craftsmanship in the cutting board is awesome. So thank you for that. And it blesses our life. And I will have problem putting, I could probably put vegetables on that board, but I'd hate to have blood running off. board, although that might commission it really well. I'll have to use it. I'll have to use it in like a party so I can show everybody our awesome cutting board. You are an extraordinary craftsman, and I appreciate that a lot. Um, yeah. Anyway, so if you had a website that people could buy your stuff, uh, I probably could sell uh, that unique. Sledgehammer, that hammer that you gave me. That was just the best. Excellent craftsmanship you do there. Alex says, thanks a bunch for doing these. I do plan on taking your class. That's great. I completely agree in the process you have figured out. The devil is in the details. God is in the rain. Devil's in the details. Regarding number 21 on the DS11, where it asks, have you previously applied for a passport? If you say yes, will that link you to your previous application? No, you got to turn in your previous application. You're correcting previous application errors. So no, you're going to be telling them that the previous application had errors concerning your citizenship and nationality. So yes, we list that. They ask for that data. We want to provide that because we're turning that passport in. If you have it, it should turn in. It doesn't matter if it's expired. We want to correct the record. So it's not a problem. The new DS11 is going to be establishing what's true under penalty of perjury. The fact that we're telling there's errors on it, we know that that application is being defiled, if you will. So that's how we do that for our clients and such as that. Okay. Well, everyone, thank you so much for being on tonight. I'm going to call it a night. Let's see. Wait, no. So here comes a bunch of. No, let's see what. You said you can help clear debt. Is that right? Yeah. For our clients, we have a debt discharge workshop that has paperwork and how to deal with the banks. That would be unsecured debt, if you will. And the thing about it, some debt like school debt, being a federal citizen, a tax liability and all that stuff, the federal government's involved with that. And so that's some of that, the way they're pursuing it and garnishing wages and all is because of someone's tax liability. So not being a federal citizen helps in that category as well. But yeah, it's unsecured debt. And we do that based on the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act, where the bankers are alleging they loaned you something, and we're asking them to disclose where did they get the funds from. Was it a bank asset or was it a depositor's asset? And we know that now that's mean. Someone's being mean. Honey, someone's referred to me as Bill Clinton. Hey, don't laugh. I did not have sex with that woman. I'm trying to have, you're not Monica. I'm trying to have sex with my wife. So, that's funny. Anyway, but don't say that. That's mean. Most of the time it's Chris Walken. So I'll stand by that guy. I used to have have a website, but closed it in 2020. Oh, yeah. There you go. Very good for you, Ruff. I like that. And yes, you should have a website. And I think you could put some things up. I think it'd be a great way for you to serve the freedom community with some of those things. I want to support you in that because I think that'll go over well. And then we'll invite you up to the Pork Fest and you can take orders for some of those things. I guarantee you people will be happy to. What about mortgages? Can those be discharged? Well, discharging them is one thing. That's a much greater process. Of course, if the bank can produce the negotiable instrument or the title, they can take that. So that is a completely different process, which we are working on, and we're ultimately working on also. Well, we're not working on the mortgage aspect of things. There is a process to that, but it requires forensic research to determine if they have any kind of deficiencies and things like that. That's one thing, because then we just usually do a quiet title for that. But we're working on eliminating property taxes, and I've got some good people in New Hampshire working on some of that. And it says, do you have to be a state citizen to get debt discharged? No, you don't, but you do with us. So yeah, it's a service that that we offer our clients. Okay, so we don't make that available to people that are not that that are federal citizens, if you will, still, or that's where they are on paper. We want them to be outside the federal zone. And we also realize that that makes much better clients in that, because sometimes people are not they're not taking a freedom stand, and they're doing debt discharge, and they don't have the conviction to take a stand when or if it is moving into court, and in which they have to require the court or the other party to not violate rights and to be truthful. So it's a different way of being that we feel is necessary with respect to our debt discharge. But no, you don't have to do ourselves to discharge debt. But if we're going to help you with it, yes, you would. We only make that stuff available for clients. So that's how that works. All right. Well, thank you all for your time tonight. It is our plan to be on for next week. And I do try to send out an email ahead of time, but sometimes we don't know till the last minute when we're going to do these. And so the first place that you'll know we're going to do these calls is that the website will be current, and it'll be pointing to a future time. And that's how you know we're going to do the call. Don't rely upon that we send out an email saying we're going to do the call. I made, like I did today, I did that this afternoon because I had a backlog of being on the computer and all that stuff. And so I didn't get to it. At some point when I have a staff, that will be done in a timely manner. We are looking for an office manager in New Hampshire, someone who wants to come to the office wherever our office is going to be. Right now it's in Franklin, New Hampshire, but wherever our office ends up being. And speaking of that, I am considering finding a location like a house and just renting that. And I got some other business plans for that, but that'll be a lot of fun. Looking to open up a private club. It'd be kind of a fun gig here in New Hampshire. So some of that. All right. Well, we will talk to you soon, okay? And next week, same bat time, same bat channel. All right. Love you all. Oh, by the way, on YouTube, if you like and subscribe, somehow that helps. And that way you'll get these notifications when they go out, if they show up, okay? So, hey, you're the best. Thanks so much for being on. Let me just say goodbye to YouTube first and say, all right, ciao, ciao. See ya.